Welcome, class, to the part 2 of this week's readings. We will be reading chapters 11 through 15 in this video. So those that are reading just a chapter a day, you can pause after we read this next chapter. Make sure that you are caught up. Like I said, we'll be getting to chapter 15 today. So those that are behind, please possibly read more than one chapter a day. But those that are on top of it, all you need to do is read a chapter a day, or read just get up to chapter 15. And then next week we'll be finishing from chapter 16 to chapter 21. And that is it for Robin Hood. We are almost done with this quarter. So please do everything that you need to get caught up. If you have any questions or need any help with any subject, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I am trying to reach out to each one of you to let you know what assignments you are missing, and to help make sure that you are on track to finish this quarter strong and ultimately be finishing 4th grade and ready to go on to 5th grade. So in chapter, this is chapter 12. Last time we read chapter 11. So in chapter 11, we learned how Robin Hood was thinking about Maid Marian and ended up actually running into Maid Marian, even though at first he thought that she was a boy as a young page, but then they were both in disguises and figured out that who each other were, and that Marian was on her way to find Robin Hood. And now Marian took Robin Hood and his 4 finest people to go see Queen Eleanor to represent her in a tournament. And that's what we are going to be reading about, is in King Harry's tournament. So this is chapter 12. The king is into Finsbury Field, marching in battle array, and after follows bold Robin Hood and all his yeomen gay meaning happy. The morning of the great archery contest brought a fever of impatience to every citizen of London. All the surrounding country folk were awake early and began to make their way to Finsbury Field, a broad stretch of practice ground near Moorfields. Around 3 sides of the field, tier upon tier of seats were erected for the spectators, with the royal boxes and booths for the nobility and gentry in the center. Down along one end were pitched gaily colored tents for the different bands of king's archers. There were 10 of these bands, each containing a score of men. Remember, a score is 20? Headed by a captain. So today there were 10 pavilions, each flying the royal armies in vari-colored pennants, which fluttered in the fresh morning breeze. Each captain's flag was of a peculiar color and device. So let's pause right here and scroll forward really quick to learn what a device is. A device, as you can read in the middle of this page, is the design or emblem that identified a person or family, or also known as a coat of arms. So each captain's flag was of a peculiar color and device. First came the royal purple streamer of Tipus, bow bearer to the king and esteemed as the finest archer in all England. Then came the yellow of Clifton of Buckinghamshire, and the blue of Gilbert of the White Hand, who was famous in Nottinghamshire, and the green of Elwyn the Welshman, and the white of Robert of Cloudsdale. And after them 5 other captains of bands, each of a man of proved skill. As the queen had said, the king was extremely proud of his archers, and held this tournament to show their skill, and perhaps to recruit their forces. The tiers of seats filled early, and the merry chatter of the people hummed like bees in a hive. In and out among the seats went hawkers selling small pennants to correspond with the rival tents. Other vendors of pies and small cakes and cider also did a pretty business. So eager had some of the people began to get good seats, that they had rushed away from home without their breakfast. Suddenly the gates at the far end opened wide, and a rider in scarlet and gold, mounted upon a white horse, rode and blowing lustily upon a trumpet, and behind him came 6 flag-bearers riding abreast. The people rose with a mighty cheer as King Harry entered the arena. He rode a fine white charger, and was clad in a rich dark suit of velvet with satin and gold facings. His hat had a long curling ostrich plume of pure white, and he lifted it graciously to answer to the shouts of the people. By his side rode Queen Eleanor, while immediately behind them came Prince Richard and Prince John, each in knightly coats of mail and helmets. Lords and ladies of the realm followed, and finally the 10 companies of archers whose progress rode round the field was greeted with hardly less applause than that given the king himself. The king and queen dismounted from their steeds, climbed the steps of the royal box, and seated themselves upon 2 thrones decked with purple and gold trappings, on a platform sheltered by striped canvas. The herald rose, and the clear note of his trumpet hushed the crowd to silence. The archers ranged themselves in 2 long rows on each side of the lists, while their captains, as a special mark of favor, stood near the royal box. So a list is, in tournaments, a fenced area where knights on horseback charge each other and try to knock his opponent from his horse with a lance. So kind of a jousting arena. And we've talked about jousting in history, and I think we talked about jousting in King Arthur as well. "Come, Tipas," said the king. "Come, measure me out this line. How long our mark must be." "What is the reward?" then asked the queen. "For first prize we have offered a purse containing 40 gold pounds," answered the king. "For second, a purse containing 40 silver pennies, and for third, a silver bulge inlaid with gold. Moreover, if the king's companies keep these prizes, the winning companies shall have first 2 casks of Rhine wine, second 2 casks of English beer, and third 5 fat harts." And a hart is a male deer, so 5 fat male deer. "Get a line of good length, Tipas," said the king, "and set up the targets at 200 paces." Tipas bowed low and set up 10 targets, each bearing the pennant of a different company, while the herald proclaimed the rules and prizes. The entries were open to all comers. Each man also of the king's archers would shoot 3 arrows at the target bearing the colors of his band, until the best bowman in each band was chosen. These 10 chosen archers would then enter a contest for an open target, 3 shots apiece, and at that time any other bowman could try his skill. The result at the open targets would decide the tournament. Then the archers waved their bows aloft and faced their respective targets. The shooting now began at all the targets at once, and the crowd had so much to watch that they forgot to shout. Besides, silence was commanded during the shooting. The full score of men shot 3 times at each target, and then 3 times again to decide a tie. For more than once the arrow shot by one man would be split wide open by the archer who shot the next. Every man's arrow bore his number to ease the counting, and they were so close at the end of a round that the target looked like a big bristle hairbrush. At last the company targets were decided, and Tipas, as expected, led the score, having made 6 exact centers in a row. Gilbert of the White Hand followed with 5, and Clifton with 4. 2 other captains had touched their center 4 times, and the other companies, it so happened that the captains had been outshot by some of the men under them. The winners then saluted the king and queen, and withdrew to rest and change their bowstrings. For the keenest contest of all, a new target, the open one, was set up at 250 paces. On the orders of the king, the herald announced that the open target was to be shot at to decide the title of the best archer in all England, and any man there might try for it. But the previous shooting had been so keen that many yeomen who had come to enter the contest now would not do so, and only a dozen men stepped forward to give their names. "These must be hardy men to pit themselves against my archers," said the king. "Do you think your 10 fellows are the best bowmen in England?" asked the queen. "Aye, and all the world besides," answered the king, "and I will stake 500 pounds on it." "I am inclined to take your wager," said the queen, "and will do so if you grant me a favor." "What is it?" asked the king. "If I find 5 archers who can outshoot your 10, will you grant my men full amnesty?" "Absolutely," said the king in good humor. "I tell you now your wager is in jeopardy, for there never were better bowmen than Tipas and Clifton and Gilbert." Said the queen, puckering her brow as though lost in thought. "I must see if anyone present can aid me in my wager. Boy, call Sir Richard of Lea and the Bishop of Hereford here." They came forward. "Sir Richard," she said, "would you advise me to agree to a wager with the king that I can produce other archers as good as Tipas, Gilbert, and Clifton?" "Nay, your majesty," he said, bending his knee. None present can match that. Though," he added, dropping his voice, "I have heard of some who hide in Sherwood Forest who could show them strange targets." The queen smiled and dismissed him. "My lord Bishop of Hereford," said he, "would you advance a sum to support my wager against the king?" "Nay, your majesty," said the fat bishop, "if you pardon me, I'd not put down a penny on such a bet, for the king's archers have no peers." "But suppose I found men whom you knew to be masters at archery," she insisted. "Would you not back them? I have heard that there are such men round Nottingham and Plympton." The bishop glanced nervously around, as if half expecting to see Robin Hood's men standing near, then turned to find the queen looking at him with an amusement lurking in her eyes. "The story of Allendale's wedding must have preceded me," he thought regretfully. Aloud he said, resolved to face it out, "Your majesty, such tales are exaggerated. If you pardon me, I will add to the king's wager that his men are invincible." "As you please," replied the queen. "How much?" "Here is my purse," said the bishop uneasily. "It contains nearly 100 pounds. "I'll take it at even money," she said, dismissing him. "And your majesty," said the queen, turning to the king, "I accept your wager of 500 pounds. "Very good," said the king, laughing as though it were great fun. "But why do you take such interest in the sport of a sudden? As I have said, I have found 5 men whom I will pit against any you may produce." "Then we will try their skill," said the king. "First, let us decide this open target, and then match the 5 best added against your mysterious champions." "Agreed," said the queen. She signaled to Maid Marian to step forward from a nearby booth, where she sat with other ladies in waiting, and whispered something in her ear. Marian curtsied and withdrew. The 10 winning archers from the king's bands came forward again, and with them stood 12 men from the open lists. Again the crowd was stilled, and every eye hung upon the speeding shaft. Slowly but skillfully each man shot, and as his shaft stuck in the inner ring, a deep breath broke from the crowd like the sound of the wind upon the seashore. Gilbert of the White Hand led the shooting, and it was only by the space of hair's breadth on the line that Tempest tied his score. Elwyn and Welshman took 3rd place. One of the private archers named Geoffrey came in 4th, while Clifton must content himself with 5th. The men from the open list shot fairly true, but nervous brought their undoing. The herald then came forward again, and instead of announcing the prize winners, proclaimed that there was to be another contest. 2 men had tied for 1st place, the king had declared, and the 3 others were entitled to honors. Now all these 5 men were to shoot again, and there were to be matched against 5 others of the queen's choosing, men who had not yet shot that day. A thrill of astonishment and excitement swept the arena. "Who were these men of the queen's?" was on every lip. The hubbub of voices grew intense, and in the midst of it all the gate at the far end of the field opened, and 5 men entered, escorting a lady on horseback across the arena to the royal box. The lady was instantly recognized as Mistress Marian, but no one seemed to know the faces of her escort. 4 were clad in Lincoln green, while the 5th, who seemed to be the leader, was dressed in a suit of scarlet red. Each man wore a close-fitting cap of black, while a curling white feather. For weapons they carried simply a bow, and a sheaf of new arrows, and a short hunting knife. When the little party came before the platform on which the king and queen sat, the yeomen raised their caps humbly, while Maid Marian dismounted. "Your gracious majesty," she said, addressing the queen, "these are the men for whom you sent me, and who are now come to wear your colors and serve you in the tournament." The queen leaned forward and handed them each a scarf of green and gold. "Locksley," she said in a clear voice, "I thank thee and thy men for this service. I have laid a wager for the king that you can outshoot the 5 best of all his bowmen." The king turned to the queen inquiringly. "Who are these men?" he asked. Up came the Bishop of Hereford, growing red. "Your pardon, my lord," he cried, "but I must denounce these fellows as outlaws. That man in the scarlet is none other than Robin Hood himself. The others are Little John and Will Stuteley and Will Scarlet and Allan a Dale, all famous in the north country for their deeds of violence. As my lord bishop personally knows," added the queen. The king's brows grew dark. The name Robin Hood was well known to every man there. "Is this true?" he demanded sternly. "Aye, my lord," responded the queen calmly. But I have your loyal promise of amnesty. That I will keep, said the king, holding his anger in check by a mighty effort. But I grant only 40 days of amnesty. When this time has passed, let the outlaws look to their safety. Then turning to his 5 victorious archers who had drawn near, he added, You have heard, my men, how I have a wager with the queen upon your skill. Now, here are men of her choosing. Look well to it, Gilbert and Tepus and Geoffrey and Elwyn and Clifton. If you outshoot these knaves, I will fill your caps with silver pennies, aye, and knight the man who stands first. But if you lose, I must give the prizes to Robin Hood and his men, according to my royal word. Robin Hood and his men? The saying flew round the arena with the speed of wildfire, and every neck craned forward to see the famous fellows who dared to face the king's anger because of the queen. Another target was now set up at the same distance as the last, and it was decided that the 10 archers should shoot 3 arrows in turn. Gilbert and Robin tossed up a penny for the lead, and it fell into the king's men. So Clifton was to shoot first. He planted his feet firmly and licked his fingers before plucking the string, for he was determined to better the score he had earlier. In truth, he did so. His shaft sped true and landed on the black bullseye, though not in the exact center. Again he shot, and again he hit the black on the opposite rim. The third shaft swerved downward and hit in the second ring. Nonetheless, a general cry went up. This was the best shooting Clifton had done that day. Will Scarlet was chosen to follow him. He now took his place and carefully chose 3 arrows. Careful, cousin, said Robin in a low tone. He has left wide space at the center for all of your darts. But Robin gave Will the wrong caution. Too much care spoiled his aim. His first arrow flew wide and lodged in the second ring, even farther away than Clifton's worst shot. I beg your pardon, cousin, said Robin. Let go of your string before it sticks to your fingers. And Will loosed his next 2 shafts as freely as if they flew along a sherwood glade. Each struck the bullseye, and one even nearer the center than his rival's mark. But the total score was still in favor of Clifton. At this, Will Scarlet bit his lip, but said no word, while the crowd shouted and waved yellow flags for joy that the king's man had overcome the outlaw. They knew also that this demonstration would please the king. The target was now cleared for the next 2 contestants, Geoffrey and Alan a Dale. Geoffrey had shot many good shafts that day, but each of his 3 shots, though well placed around the rim of the bullseye, yet allowed space for Alan to graze within. Alan's shooting, moreover, was so prettily done that he was heartily applauded, the ladies leaping and the clapping. Now there had long been a friendly rival in Robin Hood's band as to who was the best shot after Robin himself. Second place lay between Little John and Stuteley, and neither wished to yield to the other. So today they looked narrowly at their leader to see who should shoot third. Robin read their faces at a glance, and laughingly merry broke off 2 straws and held them out. The long straw goes next, he decided. Stuteley drew it. Elwyn, the Welshman, preceded him, and his score was no better than Geoffrey's, but Stuteley failed to profit by it. His failing at archery had always been haste and carelessness. Today these were increased by a certain moodiness that Little John had outranked him. So first 2 shafts flew swiftly, one after the other, to places outside the Welshman's mark. Man, cried Robin, you forgot the honor of the queen and of Sherwood. I ask your pardon, master, said Will humbly. And as he spoke, he let fly his last shaft. It whistled down the course and struck in the exact center, the best shot yet made. Some shouted for Stuteley, and some shouted for Elwyn, but Elwyn's total mark was declared the better. Then the king turned to the queen. What do you say now? Said he in some triumph. 2 out of the 3 first rounds have gone to my men. Your outlaws will have to shoot better than that in order to save your wager. The queen smiled gently. Yes, my lord, she said, but the 2 who are left are able to do the shooting. I still have Little John and Robin Hood. And you forgot, my lady, that I still have Tepus and Gilbert. So each awaited the next rounds in silent eagerness. Tepus was chosen to go next, and he fell into the same error as Will Scarlet. He held the string a moment too long, and both his first and second arrows landed off center. One of them, however, came within the black rim, and he followed it up by placing his third in the full center, just as Stuteley had done with his last. These two centers were the best shots that had been made that day, and loud applause greeted the second one. But the shouting was as nothing to the uproar that followed Little John's shooting. That good-natured giant seemed determined to outdo Tippus by a tiny margin in each separate shot, for the first and second shafts grazed his rivals on the inner side, while for the third Little John did the old trick of the forest. He shot his arrow in a graceful curve, which descended from above upon Tippus' final center shaft with a glancing blow that drove the other out and left the outlaws in its place. The king could scarcely believe his eyes. "By all that is sacred," said he, "that fellow deserves either a dukedom or a hanging. He must be in league with Satan himself. I never saw such a shooting before." "The score is tied, my lord," said the queen. "We still have to see Gilbert and Robin Hood." Gilbert now took his stand and slowly shot his arrows, one after another, into the bull's-eye. It was the best shooting he had done yet, but there was still the smallest of spaces left, if you look closely at the very center. "Well done, Gilbert," said Robin Hood. "Now, if you had placed one of your shafts there," losing one of his own, "and another there, outsped the second, and another there, the third was launched. Perhaps the king would have declared you the best bowman in all of England." But the last part of his speech was drowned in a wild tumult of applause. His first two shafts had packed themselves into the small space left at the bull's-eye, while his third had split between them, taking half of each, and making all three appear from a distance as one immense arrow. Up rose the king in amazement and anger. "Gilbert is not yet beaten," he cried. "Did he not shoot within the mark 3 times? And that is all allowed a tie in all the rules of archery." Robin bowed low. "As it please your majesty," said he, "but may I be allowed to place the mark for the second shooting?" The king waved his hands sullenly. Then Robin prepared another old trick of the greenwood, and got a light peeled willow branch, which he set in the ground as a target. "There, friend Gilbert," called he gaily, "perhaps you can hit that." "I can scarcely see it from here," said Gilbert, "much less hit it. But for the king's honor, I will try." But this final shot proved his undoing, and his shaft flew harmlessly by the thin white streak. Then Robin came to his stand again, picked his arrow with great care, and tried his string. The crowd was silent as he drew the good yew bow back to his ear, glanced along the shaft, and let the feathered missile fly. Straight it sped, singing a note of triumph as it went. The willow stand was split in two, as though it had been sliced by a hunter's knife. "Verily, I think your bow is aided by witchcraft," said Gilbert. "I did not believe such shooting possible." "You should come see your merry lads in the greenwood," answered Robin lightly. "Willow wands do not grow on the cobblestones of London." Meanwhile, the king, in great anger, had risen to depart, first signing to the judges to distribute the prizes. He never said a word, good or ill, to the queen, but mounted his horse and, followed by his sons and knights, rode off the field. The archers dropped upon one knee as he passed, but he gave them a short, sinister look and was gone. Then the queen beckoned the outlaws to approach, and they knelt at her feet. "Right well you have served me," she said, "and sorry I am that the king's anger is aroused by it. But fear not, his words hold true. As to these prizes you have won, I add others of my own, the wagers I have won from his majesty the king and from the lord bishop of Hereford. Buy with some of this money the best swords you can find in London for all your band, call them the swords of the queen, and swear with them to protect all the poor and helpless, and all the women who come your way." "We swear," said the 5 yeomen solemnly. Then the queen gave each of them her hand to kiss, and arose and departed with all her ladies. And after they were gone, the king's archers came crowding around Robin and his men, eager to get a glimpse of the fellows about whom they had heard so much. And behind them came a great crowd of the spectators, pushing and jostling to come nearer. Next the judges came up and announced to each man his prize, according to the king's command. Robin was given the purse containing 40 golden pounds. To Little John went the 40 silver pennies, and to Allan a Dale the fine inlaid bugle, much to his delight. But when the Rhine wine and English beer and hearts were spoken of, Robin said, "Nay, what need of wine or beer so far from the greenwood? and it would be like carrying coals to Newcastle, meaning to do something unnecessary. Newcastle is an English port noted for shipping coal. And it would be like carrying coals to Newcastle to drive those hearts to Sherwood. Now, Gilbert and Tepus and their men have shot well. Therefore, the meat and drink must go to them, if they will accept it from us. Right gladly, replied Gilbert, grasping his hand. You are good men all, and we will toast you every one in memory of the greatest day at archery that England has ever seen. Whew, that was an adventurous, long chapter. But Robin Hood and his men had proved to be probably the best shooters in all the land, and maybe even the world. Okay, so those that are just reading a chapter a day, you are done. But those that need to get caught up, we're going to jump into chapter 13. We have 3 more chapters that we're going to cover today. Chapter 13, How Robin Hood Was Sought by a Tinker. And while the tinker fell asleep, Robin made haste away, and left the tinker in the lurch for the great shot to pay. King Harry kept his word. Robin Hood and his men were allowed to depart from London, and the parting bringing keen sorrow to Marion. And for 40 days no hand was raised against them. But at the end of the time, the king sent word to the sheriff at Nottingham that he must capture the outlaws without further delay if he valued his office. Indeed, the exploits of Robin and his band, ending with the great tourney at Finsbury Field, had made a mighty stir through all England, and many laughed at the Nottingham sheriff for his failures. The sheriff planned 3 new expeditions into the greenwood, and was even brave enough to lead them, since he had 300 men at his beck and call each time. But he never saw the shadow of an outlaw, for Robin's men lay close, and the sheriff's men could not find their chief hiding place. Now the sheriff's daughter had hated Robin Hood bitterly ever since the day he refused to bestow the golden arrow upon her, and so shamed her before all the people. His tricks also upon her father did not lessen her hatred, and so she sought ways for the sheriff to catch the outlaw. There is no need to go against this man with force of arms, she said to her father. We must meet his tricks with tricks of our own. I wish that we could, groaned the sheriff. The fellow is a nightmare to me. Let me plan a while, she replied. Perhaps I can cook up some scheme. Agreed, said the sheriff, and if anything comes of your planning, I will give you 100 silver pennies for a new gown and a double reward to the man who catches the outlaw. Now on that same day, while the sheriff's daughter was racking her brains for a scheme, a tinker named Middle, a tinker is someone who repaired metal household utensils. So a tinker named Middle, a great gossip and braggart, came to the mansion house, and as he pounded away upon some pots and pans in the kitchen, he talked loudly about what he would do if he once came within reach of Robin Hood. It might be that this fool could succeed because of his very stupidity, thought the sheriff's daughter, overhearing his bragging, and she called him to her and looked him over, a big, brawny fellow with an honest look about the eye. I am minded to try your skill at outlaw catching, she said, and will aid generously to the stated reward if you succeed. Do you wish to make good your boast? The tinker grinned broadly. Yes, your ladyship, he said. Then here is a warrant made out this morning by the sheriff himself. See that you keep it safely and use it to good advantage. And she dismissed him. Middle departed mightily, pleased with himself and proud of his commission. He swung his crabtree staff recklessly in his glee and vowed he'd crack the ribs of Robin Hood with it, even if he was surrounded by every outlaw in Sherwood Forest. Spurred on by thoughts of his bravery, he left the town and proceeded towards Barnesdale. The day was hot and dusty, and at noon he paused at an inn to refresh himself. He began by eating and drinking, and then dozing. The innkeeper of the Blue Boar stood by, discussing Robin with a cattle driver. Folks say that the sheriff has sent to Lincoln for more soldiers and horses, and that when he has these behind him, he'll soon rid the forest of these fellows. Of whom are you speaking? Asked the tinker, sitting up. Of Robin Hood and his men, said the innkeeper. But go to sleep again. You will never get the reward. And why not? Asked the tinker, rising with great show of dignity. Where our sheriff has failed, and Guy of Gisborne, and many more besides. No more tinker will succeed. The tinker laid a heavy hand upon the innkeeper's fat shoulder and tried to look impressive. There is your reckoning, innkeeper, upon the table. I must go upon my way, because I have more important business than to stand here gossiping with you. But do not be surprised if the next time you see me, I have with me Robin Hood himself. And he strode out the door and walked up the hot road towards Barnesdale. He had not gone a quarter of a mile when he met a young man with curling brown hair and merry eyes. The young man carried his light cloak over his arm because of the heat, and was unarmed save for a light sword at his side. He eyed the perspiring tinker in a friendly way, and, seeing he was a stout fellow, spoke to him. "Good day to you," said he. "Good day to you," said the tinker, "and a morrow less hot." "Aye," laughed the other. "Where do you come from? And know you the news?" "What is the news?" said the gossiping tinker, pricking up his ears. "I am a tinker by trade, Middle by name, and come from over near Banbury." "Why, as for the news," laughed the stranger, "I hear that 2 tinkers were set in the stocks for drinking too much ale and beer." All I have to tell," said the other, "is that I am especially commissioned." He felt mighty proud of these words. "Especially commissioned to seek the outlaw they call Robin Hood." "So?" said the other, arching his brows. "How especially commissioned?" "I have a warrant from the sheriff, sealed with the king's own seal, to take him where I can. If you can tell me where he is, I will make a man of you." "Let me see the warrant," said the young man, "to satisfy myself if it be right, and I will do the best I can to bring him to you." "That I will not," replied the tinker. "I trust none with it, and if you'll not help me, then I must catch him by myself." And he made his crabtree staff whistle circles in the air. The other smiled and said, "The middle of the road on a hot July day is not a good place to talk things over. Now, if you're the man for me and I'm the man for you, let's go back to the inn just beyond the bend of road and quench our thirst and cool our heads for thinking." "That will I," said the tinker, "for though I've just come from there, my thirst rises mightily at the sound of your voice." So back he turned with the stranger and proceeded to the Blue Boar Inn. The landlord arched his eyebrows silently when he saw the 2 come in, but served them willingly. The tinker asked for wine and Robin for ale. Wine was not the most cooling drink in the cellars, nor the clearest headed. Nonetheless, the tinker asked for it, since it was expensive and the other man had invited him to drink. They lingered long over their cups, Master Middled emptying one after another, while the stranger talked at great length on the best plans for capturing Robin Hood. In the end, the tinker fell sound asleep while in the act of trying to get a tankard to his lips. Then the stranger deftly opened the snoring man's pouch, took out the warrant, read it, and put it in his own wallet. Calling the host to him, he winked at him with half a smile and told him that the tinker would pay the whole bill when he awoke. Thus Middle was left in the lurch. Still the stranger seemed in no great hurry. He had the whim to stay a while and see what the tinker might do when he awoke. So he hid outside behind a window shutter and waited. Presently the tinker awoke with a mighty yawn and reached at once for another drink. "What were you saying, friend? About the best plan?" "Yeah, for catching this fellow." "Hello, where's he gone?" He could see no one with him at the table and looked around. "Host, host," he shouted, "where's that fellow who was to pay my reckoning?" "I know not," answered the landlord sharply. "Perhaps he left the money in your purse." "No, he didn't," roared the Middle, looking there. "Help, help, I've been robbed. Look you, host, you are liable to arrest for high treason. I am here upon the king's business, as I told you earlier in the day, and yet while I did rest under your roof, thinking you were an honest man, and one loving the king, my pouch has been opened and the matters of state taken from it." "Cease your bellowing," said the landlord. "What did you lose?" "Oh, many weighty matters, I do assure you. I had with me, item, a warrant granted under the hand of my lord High Sheriff of Nottingham, and sealed with the king's own seal for the capture, an arrest of a notorious rascal, one Robin Hood of Sherwood. Item, 1 crust of bread. Item, 1 lump, of solder. Solder is a mixture of tin and lead that is melted to bond 2 pieces of metal together. Item, 3 pieces of twine. Item 6 single keys. Heck. Item 12 silver pennies, which I earned this week. Heck. And fair labor. Item. Enough of your items, said the host. I marvel greatly to hear you speak in such fashion of your friend Robin Hood. For was he not with you just now? And did he not drink with you in good fellowship? What? Robin Hood? Gasped Middle with staring eyes. Why did you not tell me? Faith, I saw no need of telling you. Did you not tell me the first time you were here today that I need not be surprised if you come back with none other than Robin Hood himself? I see it all now, moaned the tinker. He got me to drink in, then took my warrant and my pennies and my crust. Yes, yes, interrupted the host. I know all about that. Now you must pay me the bill for both of you. But I have no money. Let me go after that sly bag of bones, and I'll soon get it out of him. If I waited for you to collect from Robin Hood, replied the other, I would soon close up shop. What is the account? Asked Middle, discouraged. 10 shillings. Then take my bag and my good hammer too, and if I find that knave, I will soon come back after them. Give me your leather coat as well, said the host. The hammer and the tools are nothing to me. Mercy, cried Middle, losing what was left of his temper. It seems that I escaped one thief only to fall into the hands of another. If you will walk with me out in the middle of the road, I'll give you such a crack that will drive some honesty into your thick skull. You are wasting your breath and my time, reported the landlord. Give me your things and get gone after your man speedily. Middle thought this was good advice, so he left the blue boar in a black mood. Before he had gone half a mile, he saw Robin Hood walking calmly, a little ahead of him. Ho, there, you villain, roared the tinker. Stay your steps. I am desperately in need of you. Robin turned about with a surprised face. What knave is this? He asked gently. Who comes shouting after me? No knave at all, panted the other, rushing up, but an honest man who would have that warrant and the money for drink. Why, as I live, it is our honest tinker who was seeking Robin Hood. Did you find him? Indeed, that did I, and I'm now going to pay him my respects. And he plunged at him, making a sweeping stroke with his crabtree cudgel. Robin tried to draw his sword, but could not do it for a moment while he dodged the other's furious blows. Before he did get it in hand, the tinker had reached him 3 times with resounding thwacks. Then the tables were turned as Robin dashed at the tinker with his shiny blade and made him retreat. The greenwood rang with the noise of the fray. It was steel against wood, and they made a terrible clattering when they came together. Robin thought at first that he could hack the cudgel to pieces, for his blade was one of finely tempered steel, which the queen had given him. But the crabtree staff had been fired and hardened and seasoned by a tinker's arts until it was like a bar of iron, no pleasant neighbor for one's ribs. Robin presently found this out to his sorrow. The long reach and long stick got to him when it was impossible for him to touch his antagonist, so his sides began to ache sorely. Hold your hand, tinker, he said at length. I beg a favor of you. Before I do it, said the tinker, I'll hang you on this tree. But as he spoke, Robin found the moment's grace for which he longed and immediately grasped his horn and blew the 3 well-known blasts. Up to your old tricks, are you? Roared the tinker, starting up afresh. Well, I'll have time to finish my job if I hurry. But Robin was quite able to hold his own, and they had not exchanged many strokes when up came Little John and Will Scarlet and a score of yeomen at their heels. Middle was seized instantly, while Robin sat down to breathe. What is the matter? Said Little John, that you should sit so on the highway side. That rascally tinker yonder has paid his bill well upon my hide, answered Robin. That tinker, then, said Little John, must be itching for more work. Can he do as much for me? Or me? Said Will Scarlet, who, like Little John, was always willing to swing a cudgel. Nay, laughed Robin, perhaps I could have done better if had given me time to pull a young tree up, but I hated to spoil the queen's blade upon his tough stick. Besides, he had a good quarrel with me. He had a warrant for my arrest, which I stole from him. Also, item 12 silver pennies, interposed the tinker insistently. Item 1 crust of bread, my supper. Item 1 lump of solder. Item 3 pieces of twine. Item 6 single items. 6 single keys. Item. Yes, I know, said Merry Robin. I stood outside the Blue Boar's window and heard you count over your losses. Here they are again, and the 12 silver pennies are turned by magic into gold. Here also, if you will, is my hand. I take it gladly with the pennies, cried Middle, and so shall I have my leather coat and tools presently from that sly host. Now, I swear that I never yet met a man I liked as well as you. If you and your men here will take me, I swear I'll serve you honestly. Do you want a tinker? Verily, you must. Who else can mend and grind your swords and fight too, when need be, and mend your pots and mend your pans? What do you say, fellows? Asked Robin. Would not this tinker be a good recruit? That he would, answered Will Scarlet, clapping the new man on the back. He will keep Friar Tuck and Much, the miller's son, from having the blues. So amid great merriment and good fellowship, the outlaws shook Middle by the hand. He took oath of loyalty and never thought more of the sheriff's daughter. I think that might be the downfall of Robin Hood. What do you guys think? Sorry, I just need to get a drink. Okay, on to chapter 14. Just 2 more chapters, okay? How Robin Hood met Sir Richard of the Leah. Then answered him the gentle knight, with words both fair and free, God save thee, my good Robin, and all thy company. Months passed as winter dragged warily through Sherwood Forest. Robin Hood and his merry men found what cheer they could in the big crackling fires before their woodland cave. Friar Tuck had built a little hermitage not far away, where he lived comfortably with his numerous dogs. At last the blessed spring came and went. Another summer passed, and still neither king nor sheriff nor bishop could catch the outlaws, who meanwhile prospered mightily. The band had been increased from time to time by picked men such as Arthur a Bland, until it now numbered a full 7 companies, each with its lieutenant serving under Robin Hood. And still they relieved the rich of their purses, and aided the poor, and feasted upon king's deer, until the sheriff of Nottingham was nearly insane. Indeed, the sheriff would probably have lost his office had it not been for the fact of the king's death. Henry passed away, as all kings will, like ordinary men, and Richard the Lion-Hearted was proclaimed as his successor. Then Robin and his men, after earnest debate, resolved to throw themselves upon the mercy of the new king, swear allegiance, and ask to be accepted as royal foresters. So Will Scarlet and Will Stuteley and Little John were sent to London with this message, which they were first to give privately to Maid Marian. But they soon returned with bad tidings. The new king was still gone on a crusade to the Holy Land, and Prince John, his brother, was impossible to deal with, being crafty, cruel, and treacherous. He was laying his hands upon all the property that could easily be seized, including the estates of the Earl of Huntingdon, Robin's old enemy and Marian's father, who had lately died. Marian herself was in trouble. Her estates had been taken away. She had lost the protection of the former queen, and the evil prince John tormented her with his attentions. He thought that since Marian was defenseless, he could carry her away to one of his castles, and no one could prevent him. No word of this peril reached Robin's ears, although his men brought him news of the seizure of the Huntingdon lands. Nonetheless, he was greatly alarmed for the safety of Maid Marian, and his heart cried out for her strongly. She had been continually in his thoughts ever since the tournament at London. One morning in early autumn, when the leaves were turning gold at the edges and the whole wide woodland was scented with the ripe fragrance of fruit, Robin was walking along the edge of a small glade, busy with his thoughts. The peace of the woods was upon him, despite his broodings over Marian, and he paid little notice to a group of does quietly feeding at the far edge of the glade. But suddenly a stag, wild and ferocious, dashed from among the trees, scattering the does. The vicious beast eyed Robin's green and gold tunic, and lowering its head, charged at him. So sudden was its attack that Robin had no time to bend his bow. He sprang behind a tree while he fixed an arrow upon the string. A moment later the stag crashed spinelessly into the tree trunk, with a shock that sent the beast reeling backward, while the leaves from the shivering tree fell in a small shower over Robin's head. He saw the stag turn about and fix its glance rigidly on the bushes to the left side of the glade. These were parted by a delicate hand, and through the opening appeared the slight figure of a page. It was Maid Marian, who had come back to Sherwood. She stepped forward, unaware of Robin's horrified gaze or the evil fury of the stag. She was directly in line with the animal, so Robin dared not launch an arrow. Her own bow was slung across her shoulder, and her small sword would be useless against the beast's charge. With a savage snort of rage, the beast rushed at this new target, rushed so swiftly and from so short a distance that Marian could not defend herself. She sprang to one side as it charged down upon her, but a glancing blow from its antlers stretched her upon the ground. The stag stopped, turned, and lowered its head, preparing to gore her to death. Already its cruel horns were coming straight for her, while she, bewildered, was struggling to rise. A moment more, and the end would come, but the sharp voice of Robin had already spoken. "Down, Marian!" he cried, and the girl instinctively obeyed, just as a shaft from Robin's bow went whizzing close above her head and struck with terrific force full in the center of the stag's forehead. The beast stumbled and fell dead. Across Marian's body she had fainted. Robin was quickly by her side and dragged the beast off the girl. Picking her up in his strong arms, he carried her swiftly to the side of one of the brooks which watered the vale. He dashed cool water upon her face, roughly, almost in his agony of fear that she was already dead, and he nearly shed tears of joy to see those poor closed eyelids tremble. Presently she gave a little gasp. "Where am I? What is it?" "You are in Sherwood." She opened her eyes and sat up. "You have rescued me from the sudden danger, sir," she said. Then she recognized Robin for the first time, and a radiant smile came over her face. Her head sank upon his shoulder with a little tremble and sigh of relief. "Oh, Robin, it's you," she murmured. "Aye, thank heaven. I was at hand to do service." Robin's tones were full of feeling. "I swear, dear Marian, that I will not let you from my care again." Not another word was spoken for some moments, while her head still rested upon his chest. Then recollecting, he suddenly cried, "Mercy, I make a poor nurse. I have not even asked if any of your bones are broken." "No," she answered, springing lightly to her feet to show him. "That foolish dizziness overcame me for the moment, but we can now go on our way." "No, I did not mean that," he protested. "Why should we hurry? First tell me the news in London and of yourself." So she told him that the prince had seized her father's lands and promised to restore them to her if she would listen to his proposal, and how she knew that he meant her no good, for he was even then asking for a princess's hand. "That is all, Robin," she ended simply, "and that is why I put on my page's costume and came to you." Robin's brow had grown fiercely black at the recital of her wrongs, and he had laid his hand sternly on the hilt of his sword. "By the sword that Queen Eleanor gave me," he said impetuously, "and which is devoted to the service of all women, I promise that Prince John and all his armies shall not harm you." I'm gonna grab a drink really quick. So that is how Maid Marian came to live in the greenwood, where the whole band of yeomen welcomed her gladly, and Allan a Dale's wife made her fully at home. But this was a day of deeds in Sherwood Forest that led to later events. While Robin and Marian were having their encounter with the stag, Little John, Much the miller's son, and Will Scarlet had gone to watch the high road leading to Barnesdale, on the chance they might meet a knight or priest whose wallet was too full. They had scarcely watched the great road for many minutes, when they spied a knight riding by in a very sad manner. Little John came up to the knight and asked him to stop, for who can judge a man's wealth by his looks? The outlaw bent his knee in courtesy and asked the knight to accept the hospitality of the forest. "My master expects you to dine with him today," he said. "Who is your master?" asked the knight. "Robin Hood," replied Little John, laying his hand upon the knight's bridle. Seeing the other two outlaws approaching, the knight shrugged his shoulders and replied carelessly, "It is clear that your invitation cannot be refused," said he. "Now I will go with you right willingly, my friends. My purpose was to dine today at Doncaster, but nothing matters greatly." So in the same lackadaisical fashion that had marked all his actions that day, the knight let his horse be led to the band's hideaway in the greenwood. Marian had not yet had time to change her page's costume when the three escorts of the knight came in sight. She recognized their captive as Sir Richard of the Leah, whom she had often seen at court, and fearing he might recognize her, she turned to leave. But Robin asked her with a twinkle if she would not like to play page, and she consented to do so. "Welcome, Sir Knight," said Robin courteously. You are come in good time, for we were just preparing to sit down to eat." "God save you, Master Robin," returned the knight, "and all your company." So while his horse was cared for, the knight laid aside his heavy gear, washed his face and hands, and sat down with Robin and all his men to a plentiful dinner of venison, swans, pheasants, various small birds, cakes, and ale. Merlin stood behind Robin and filled his cup and that of the guest. After eating heartily, the knight brightened up greatly and vowed that he had not enjoyed so good a dinner for nearly 3 weeks. He also said that if ever Robin and his fellows should come to his lands, he would set them down to as good a dinner. But this was not exactly the sort of payment that Robin expected. He thanked the knight, but reminded him that a yeoman like himself could hardly offer such a dinner to a knight as a gift of charity. "I have no money, Master Robin," answered the knight frankly. "I have so little of the world's goods, in truth, that I should be ashamed to offer you the whole of it. Money, however little, always jingles merrily in our pockets," said Robin, smiling. "Pray tell me what you consider a little sum." "I have 10 silver pennies," said the knight. "Here they are. I wish they were 10 times as many." He handed Little John his pouch, and Robin nodded carelessly. "What is the total, Little John?" he asked. "It's true enough, as the knight has said," responded the big fellow, emptying the contents on his cloak. Robin signed to Merlin, who filled a cup of wine for himself and his guest. "Sir Knight," cried the merry outlaw, "why these sorry times? I see that your armor is bent and that your clothes are torn. Yet I think I saw you at court once upon a day, and looking more prosperous. Tell me now, have you been a bad steward to yourself and wasted your money in lawsuits and the like? Do not be bashful with us. We shall not betray your secrets." "I am a Saxon knight in my own right, and I have always lived a sober and quiet life," the sorrowful guest replied. "'Tis true you may have seen me at court, for I saw you at King Harry's tournament. My name is Sir Richard of Leah, and I dwell in a castle not far from one of the gates of Nottingham, which has belonged to my father, and his father's father before him. 2 or 3 years ago, my neighbors might have told you that a matter of 400 pounds one way or the other was nothing to me, but now I have only these 10 pennies of silver and my wife and son." "How have you lost your riches?" asked Robin. "Through folly and kindness," said the knight, sighing. "I went with King Richard upon a crusade, from which I lately returned, in time to find my son grown up. He had achieved a squire's training, and could play prettily in jousts and tournaments, and other knightly games. But he had the ill luck to accidentally kill a knight in the open lists. To save the boy, I had to sell my lands and mortgage my family's castle, and this not being enough, in the end I have to borrow money at a very high interest from my Lord of Hereford." "A most worthy bishop," said Robin. "How much is your debt?" 400 pounds, said Sir Richard, "and the bishop swears he will take my castle if they are not paid promptly." "Have you any friends who would guarantee your promise for me?" "Not one. If good King Richard were here, the tale might be otherwise." "Fill your goblet again, Sir Knight," said Robin, and he turned to whisper a word in Merlin's ear. She nodded, drew Little John and Will Scarlet aside, and talked earnestly with them in a low tone. "Here is your health and prosperity to you, gallant Robin," said Sir Richard, tilting his goblet. "I hope I may repay your hospitality more worthily the next time I ride by." Will Scarlet and Little John meanwhile consulted the other outlaws, who nodded their heads. Then Little John and Will Scarlet went into the cave nearby, and presently returned bearing a bag of gold. Then they counted out 400 gold pieces before the astonished knight. "Take this loan from us, Sir Knight, and pay your debt to the bishop," said Robin, "and you owe us no thanks. You are only exchanging creditors, perhaps. We shall not be so hard upon you as the Christian bishop, yet again we may be harder, who can tell?" There were actually tears in Sir Richard's eyes as he tried to thank the foresters. "God save you, comrades, and keep you all," said he, with deep feeling, "and give me a grateful heart." "We shall wait for you 12 months from today here in this place," said Robin, shaking him by the hand, "and then you will repay us the loan if you have prospered." "I shall return it to you within the year, upon my honor as Sir Richard of Leah, and for all the time count on me as a steadfast friend." So saying, the knight, led by one of the Robin's men, rode down the glade till they were lost to view. Wow. Wonder if that's going to be the downfall. Do you think this might be a downfall to Robin, or do you think Robin will continue to make good friends in high places, and maybe Robin Hood can, become a forester or something and not be an outlaw? Well, we shall see, huh? But maybe those that have read the chapter titles might know what might be coming. Okay, this is our last chapter for this week, okay? Chapter 15, How the Bishop Dined. So those that are just reading a chapter a day, you can pause and come back to this video. Those that are behind and trying to get caught up, you can follow along with me right now. "Oh, what is the matter?" then said the bishop. "Or for whom do ye make this ado? Or why do ye kill the king's venison, when your company is so few? We are shepherds, quoth both bold Robin Hood, and we keep sheep all the year. And we are disposed to be merry this day, and to kill of the king's fat deer." Not many days after Sir Richard of Leah came to Sherwood Forest, word reached Robin Hood that the Bishop of Hereford would be riding that way on that morning. Robin's face brightened as he heard it. "Now, by Our Lady," he said, "I have long desired to entertain the bishop in the greenwood, and this is too good a chance to let slip. Come, men, kill me a good fat deer. The Bishop of Hereford shall dine with me today, and pay well for his dinner." "Shall we butcher it here as usual?" asked Much, the miller's son. "No, we will play a game on the churchman. We will dress it by the highway side and watch for the bishop closely, in case he should ride some other way." So Robin gave his orders, and most of his men went to different parts of the forest, under Will Stuteley and Little John, to watch other roads. Robin Hood took 6 of his men, including Will Scarlet and Much, and placed himself in full view of the main road. This little company disguised themselves as shepherds. Robin had an old wool cap with a tail to it, hanging it over his ear, and a shock of hair stood straight up through a hole on the top. Besides, there was so much dirt on his face that you would never have known him. An old tattered cloak over his hunter's garb completed his makeup. The others were no less ragged and filthy. They quickly shot themselves a deer and were preparing to cook it over a small fire, when a little dust was seen blowing along the highway, and out of it came the portly bishop, cantering along with 10 men at arms at his heels. As soon as he saw the shepherds, he spurred up his horse and came straight toward them. "Who are you to make so free with the king's deer?" he asked sharply. "We are shepherds," answered Robin, pulling at his cap awkwardly. "Heaven have mercy, you seem a sorry lot. Who gave you permission to stop eating mutton?" "It's one of our feast days, and we wish to be merry and dine on deer, out here where there are so many." "The king shall hear of this. Who killed yon beast?" "First give me your name, your excellence, so that I may speak of it as is fitting," replied Robin stubbornly. "It's my Lord Bishop of Hereford, fellow," interjected one of the guards fiercely. "See that you keep a civil tongue in your head." "If he is a churchman," retorted Will Scarlet, "he would do better to mind his own flocks rather than concern himself with ours." "You are sassy fellows," cried the bishop, "and we will see if your heads will pay for your manners. Quit your stolen roast and march along with me, for you shall be brought before the sheriff of Nottingham immediately." "Pardon, your excellence," said Robin, dropping on his knees. "Pardon, I pray you. It does not become your calling to take so many lives away." "I'll pardon you when I see you hanged," said the bishop. "Seize them, men." But Robin had already sprung away, and from underneath his ragged cloak he drew his trusty horn and blew those piercing notes that summoned the band. The bishop no sooner saw this action than he knew that Robin had set a trap. Being a coward, he wheeled his horse sharply and would have ridden off down the road, but his own men blocked his way. At almost the same instant, the bushes around seemed to come alive with outlaws. Little John's men came from one side, and Will Stuteley's from the other. The worthy bishop soon found himself a prisoner, and began to beg for mercy from the men he had so lately been ready to hang. Oh, pardon, I pray you," said the bishop, "for if I had known it was you, I'd gone some other way." "I owe you nothing," retorted Robin. "I will even treat you better than you would have treated me. Come along with me. I have already planned for you to dine with me this day." So the unwilling bishop was dragged away with the half-cooked venison upon the back of his own horse, And Robin and his band took charge of the whole company and led them through the forest till they came to an open space near Barnesdale. Here they rested. Much the miller's son began roasting the deer again, while another and fatter beast was set to sizzle on the other side of the fire. Presently, the appetizing odor of the cooking reached the bishop's nostrils, and he sniffed it eagerly. The morning's ride had made him hungry, and he did not hesitate when they called him to dinner. Robin gave him the place beside himself, and the bishop prepared to eat. "Nay, my lord, but we are accustomed to say grace before eating," said Robin, "and as our own chaplain is not with us today, will you be good enough to say it for us?" The bishop reddened, but pronounced grace in Latin hastily, and then settled himself to make the best of his lot. Red wines and ale were poured out into their horn tankards. Laughter bubbled among the diners, and the bishop caught himself smiling at more than one jest. But who could resist a freshly broiled venison steak eaten out in the open air to the tune of good fellowship? Stuteley filled the bishop's tankard with wine each time he emptied it, and the bishop got mellower and mellower as the afternoon shadows lengthened on towards sunset. Then the approaching dusk warned him of his position. "I wish," said he gravely to Robin, who had soberly drunk only 1 cup of ale, "that you would tell me what I owe you. 'Tis late, and I fear the cost of this entertainment may be more than my poor purse can stand." "Indeed, your lordship," said Robin, scratching his head, "I have enjoyed your company so much that I scarcely know how to charge for it." "Lend me your purse, my lord," said Little John, interposing, "and I'll give you the reckoning by and by." The bishop shuddered. He had collected Sir Richard's debt that very morning, and was even then carrying it home. "I have but a few silver pennies of my own," he whined, "and as for the gold in my saddle's bag, it is for the church. Surely you would not take from the church, good friends." But Little John had already gone to the saddle bags, and when he returned he laid the bishop's cloak on the ground and poured out 400 glittering gold pieces. It was the identical money Robin lent Sir Richard a short while before. "Ah," said Robin, as though an idea had just then come to him, "the church is always willing to aid in charity, and seeing this goodly sum reminds me that I have a friend who is indebted to a churchman for this exact amount. Now, we shall charge you nothing for your dinner, but will make use of this to aid my good friend." "No, no," began the bishop with a worried look. "Was this not the king's meat, after all, that we feasted upon? Furthermore, I am a poor man." "Poor," answered Robin in scorn. "You are the Bishop of Hereford. Does not the whole countryside speak of your cruelty to the poor and ignorant? You who should use your great office to aid instead of oppress them. Have you not been guilty of far greater robbery than this, even though less open? Of myself I say nothing, nor of your unjust hatred against my father. But on account of those you have robbed and oppressed, I take this money, and I will use it to a far more worthy purpose than you would. God be my witness in this. There is an end of the matter unless you will lead us in a song or dance to show that your body has a better spirit than your mind. Strike up the harp, Alan." "Neither will I do," snarled the bishop. "Then we must help you," said Little John, and he seized the fat, struggling churchman and began to hop up and down. The bishop, being shorter, was forced to dance, while the whole company sat and rolled about over the ground and roared. At last he sank in a heap, fuddled with wine and quiet exhaustion. Little John picked him up as though he were a log of wood, and carrying him to his horse, set him on it facing the animal's tail. Then, leading the animal toward the high road, he sent the bishop, more dead than alive, toward Nottingham. That was, I think, a pretty brilliant scheme to be able to get the money back that he gave to King Richard of Leah. I thought that was pretty clever. Anyways, that is it, guys. Hope you enjoyed chapters 11. Today, 12 through 15, but those that listen and follow along with chapter 11 in part 1. That is it. Make sure you are getting caught up and staying on top of your work. We only have just one more week after this week of school, so do everything you can to work hard and be diligent and finish this quarter strong. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or need help with any assignment. Okay, I'll see you guys in the next video.